Hey everybody, this one is called YouTube Tyrants. They went and shut my channel down, and it was back up real quick, and so we'll see what I did. First of all, what's a tyrant? Well, a tyrant, Aristotle defined what a tyrant is. Those who, in order to hold his power, suppress every superiority, does away with good men, forbids education and light. Gee, that sounds like YouTube. Controls every movement of the citizens. Well, they can't really do that. Keeping them under perpetual servitude. Can't do that too much. Wants them to grow accustomed to baseness and cowardice. Definitely doing that. Spies everywhere. Definitely doing that. To listen to what's said in meetings. Definitely doing that. Spreads dissension and calumny. Calumny is lies among citizens. Definitely doing that. Impoverishes them, well, yeah, somewhat. Obliged to make war in order to keep the subjects occupied and impose upon them permanent need of a chief. Well, they can't do that. If they could, they probably would. Anyways, so that's what Aristotle said a tyrant is, and YouTube fits the bill for about 80% of it. This was last night, Tuesday, July 2nd. Last night, 4:30 a.m. Today is the 4th, so it would have been a couple days ago in the early morning. So YouTube just deleted Sovereign Living. I was in the middle of watching a video and got kicked off. I can't watch any of it on any of my devices, saying that he has multiple and severe violations. I can't seem to find how to get a hold of YouTube about this. Anyway, so that was somebody on my group that sent an email out. This is what they sent to me. We'd like to inform you that due to repeated and severe violations of our community guidelines, well, what repeat and severe? This is the first one they ever sent me. And so, again, I'm building a case against these criminals, these pigs, these YouTube pigs. And we're going to be talking about it in court. Your YouTube account has been suspended. After review, we determined that activity in your account violated our community guidelines, which prohibited spam. Oh yeah, spam? When did I do spam? Commercially deceptive content. Well, you know, I prove everything I say. So anyways, this was the email that they sent. It's probably just a standard form letter. Repeated. This is the first one. This is the first time they've done it. But believe me, I collect everything. I've got evidence. I'm going to break it off in their ass. And this is what I replied. Well, hold it. Let's go back. If you go here, if you would like to appeal the suspension, please submit this form. Okay, and so I did. I have been to the Supreme Court 5 times, and I'm going to sue your ass off, and every member of your board of directors and all of your executive officers are personally liable in their private capacity. That's all I said. Now notice the time. This was at 3:37 a.m. Okay, and then at 4:13 a.m. So that's what, 45 minutes later. We've received your account appeal and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And here is where I sent out an email, said where they could get my videos. This was at 4:19, and this is an email that I sent at 7:59. This is their response, 4:24. Okay, so let's go back here. 4:13, 4:24. So what's that, like 11 minutes later? We have re-reviewed your account and have concluded it's not in violation of our terms of service. Therefore, we have unsuspended your account. This means your account is once again active and operational and in good standing. If you have forgotten your password, please submit this link. Okay, so that's all it took, folks. You know, there's a lot of people been getting kicked off of YouTube lately, and I wonder if they started threatening to sue their butt off, if it might have changed. I'll bet it would have. Anyways, oh, and get a load of this. This is, as you may know, our community service guidelines describe which content we allow and don't allow on YouTube. Your video, U.S. Border Pigs 3, was flagged for us for review. Upon review, we determined that it may not be suitable for all viewers. It has been placed behind an age restriction. Okay, so That's been up there for like about, what, 3-4 years, okay? And all of a sudden, what they're doing is they're grabbing at straws. They're looking for excuses to justify what they did. I'm going to sue their butt off. Everything they do is evidence. So go ahead, you YouTube pigs. Go ahead. Make my day. So these YouTube tyrants keep all records. It's evidence. Every email, everything they send you, it's evidence. Build a case against them. Always be building a case against these YouTube pigs. Everything YouTube does gives me evidence against them. Anything YouTube does will be used against them in a court of law. Go ahead, YouTube. Make my day. Copies of these documents, it's a good thing this came up because I was starting to get worked up. Copies of these documents can be found on my website and linked under my recent YouTube videos. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the fake money, the military script, the Federal Reserve notes, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. These YouTube tyrants are all corporations or agencies of the government. This is Section 3 of the Government Corporation Operation Act of Canada. For every corporation, for all its purposes, is an agent of Her Majesty and right of Canada. So think about it. You know, you don't think that's the same in the U.S. or any other country? Of course they are. They have a franchise. They have a license. They have permission to operate under a corporation. This is the Canadian Ownership and Control Determination Act. Owned means subject to the regulations. If you're subject to the regulations, you're owned. You are property. And who owns you? It's the government that owns you. That's why they can change the rules whenever they feel like it. That's why they can tax you. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the other property belonging to the United States. It's the same thing in America. It's the same thing in any country. When you incorporate into the government. Everything subject to regulations is government property. A corporation is a franchise from the government. It's a license. It's a permission. McCullough versus Maryland, U.S. Supreme Court. All subjects over which the sovereign power of the state extend are objects of taxation, but those over which it does not extend are exempt from taxation. This proposition may also be pronounced as self-evident. It's obvious. If the government creates it, it's their property. They're just letting you use it. The sovereignty of the state extends to everything which exists by its authority and its permission. Taxation is slavery. Taxation is regulations. If they can take a penny, they can take it all. It's well documented that Google was created from seed money obtained from the Central Intelligence Agency, and Google owns YouTube. It is unconstitutional for Congress to create corporations and to use those corporations to circumvent constitutional requirements like due process. It's evidence of the tyranny being imposed by these Congress tyrants. A private law is one which is confined to particular individuals, associations, or corporations. A private law can be enforced by a court of competent jurisdiction when statutes for its enforcement are enacted. Statutes creating corporations are private acts. In this connection, the Federal Reserve Act is private law. Federal Reserve banks derive their existence and corporate power from the Federal Reserve Bank. Status, condition, situation, compare a state. A corporation has no status as a citizen outside the jurisdiction where it was created. A corporation is a citizen. A citizen is a corporation. If they're assaulting you with their U.S. citizen slave, then you are in the District of Columbia. The law of status, the category of law dealing with personal or non-proprietary rights of whether in rem or in personam. It is one of three departments in which civil law is divided. And that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary. Governments descend to the level of mere private corporation and take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen where private, corporate, commercial paper and securities is concerned. For purposes of suits, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. Governments lose their immunity and descend to the level of private corporations when involved in commercial activity, enforcing negotiable instruments as in fines, penalties, assessments, bails, taxes. The remedy lies in the hand of the state and its municipalities seeking remedy. So they assault you with one of their contracts. So these YouTube pigs can't sit there and claim Congress is the real source of the problem. Congress did that thing with the Communications Decency Act and Section 231 or whatever it is that gives these YouTube pigs, they seem to think they have license to do whatever they want, and with censorship. And Trump has recently issued an executive order that says otherwise. It's a good thing we got somebody like Trump in office. Otherwise, who knows what would be happening. Ultra vires, an act performed without any authority to act on the subject, acts beyond the scope of the powers of a corporation as defined by its charter or laws of state of incorporation. The term has broad application, includes not only acts prohibited by the charter, but acts which are in excess of powers granted and not prohibited, and generally applied either when a corporation has no power whatever to do an act, or when the corporation has the power but exercises it irregularly. Act is ultra vires when corporations without authority to perform it under any circumstances or for any purposes. The doctrine of ultra vires, a contract is made by a corporation beyond the scope of its corporate powers, is unlawful. Ultra vires act of municipality is one which is beyond powers conferred upon it by law. Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition. So it's ultra vires. A society whose citizens refuse to see and investigate the facts, who refuse to believe that their government and their media will routinely lie to them and fabricate a reality contrary to verifiable facts, is a society that chooses and deserves the police state dictatorship it's going to get. And that's right, it's a medical dictatorship. Martial law affects chiefly the police and collection of revenue and taxes, whether imposed by the expelled government or by the invader, and refers mainly to the support and efficiency of the army, its safety and safety of its operations. That's what's going on, folks. Remember, they want you to be safe. Yeah, they want you to be safe. That's military dictatorship, folks. Got to be safe. Governors like Abbott are issuing their edicts under their military dictatorship to ensure that you are safe. Papers, please. Their military dictatorship. Congress created the National Security Agency so you and I can be surveilled. Congress created the Central Intelligence Agency so you and I can be subjected to false flag operations. Congress authorized the Uniform Commercial Code because they intended to subject everybody to international law. Congress created the Trading with the Enemy Act to make war on the people with their fraudulent, fictitious wars, like the war on terror and the war on crime and the war on drugs. Congress authorized the Internal Revenue Service to impoverish the people. Congress created the unconstitutional municipal corporation. Congress created the fake money in the scenario for the bankruptcy. Congress surrendered to the International Monetary Fund and the Roman cult through the bankruptcy. Congress has disappeared the true Article 13 Amendment to allow bar members to infiltrate everywhere. Congress has mandated that bar members in the judiciary. Congress is dumbing down children in the public school system. Congress has given pharmaceutical companies immunity from suit for their vaccinations, creating a generation of autistic people. Congress created the National Institutes for Health and the Centers for Disease Control and gave them immunity for their crimes. Congress created two classes of citizens to enslave everybody. Congress gave governments permission to screen for low intelligence for their code enforcers. Congress granted plausible deniability to their order followers so they can rape, pillage, and murder as much as they like, and then claim good faith immunity. Congress mandated fluoride in the drinking water to dumb down the people for their concentration camps. Congress refuses to approve the International Criminal Court because they intend to engage in war crimes. Not that I have any love for the UN Satanists. Congress created the Roman cult Sestake Trust as a mechanism to enslave everybody, collateralize their so-called debt, and sell everybody into slavery. Congress mandated everybody register their births to compel everybody into their slavery system. Congress created administrative law based on fraudulent, fictitious contracts as a mechanism of slavery. Congress created all sorts of prisons to facilitate their military dictatorship and their slavery agenda. Congress gave the president the power to make war without congressional approval as a mechanism of slavery all over the planet, of murder and slavery. Congress mandated child protective services to engage in the theft of our children to facilitate the pedophilia industry. Congress mandated child support in their so-called court to impoverish people and support their prison industry. Congress has converted all of the states into territories with their international law rule, their administrative law, and their so-called contracts. Congress mandated filing fees for their bar members to convert a court case into a commercial transaction so the bought and paid for whore selling as just us can sit there and play stupid and then use their millions of codes, rules, and regulations against you. Congress imposed a military dictatorship to supersede and replace common law. Congress mandating their so-called real ID for their slaves to fabricate evidence of their slaves for their bar members' presumptions. Congress has given pharmaceutical companies immunity for their poisonous vaccines. Congress has authorized naked short selling on Wall Street. So don't invest on Wall Street because you're wasting your time. Do a search on YouTube for naked short selling. It's going on all over the place. There's three kinds of martial law. Full martial law, declaration of martial law is issued, troops put on the street, used only during wartime, used in foreign country when actually invaded by a foreign power to put down an armed rebellion. Martial law proper is the law of the armed forces when a captain tells a private what to do, and it's enforced by court-martials. The martial law rule, the law of necessity and emergency, allows the domestic use of martial law powers used during times of peace can continue for centuries during a military occupation. And that's to U.S. Supreme Court, Ex parte Milligan, and also Diet versus Turner, the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court. Martial law is the public law of necessity. Necessity calls it forth, necessity justifies its exercise, and necessity measures the extent and degree to which it may be employed. That necessity is no formal, artificial, legalistic concept, but an actual, factual one. It is the necessity of taking action to safeguard the state against insurrection, riot, disorder, or public calamity. What constitutes necessity is a question of fact in each case. And that's Frederick B. Weiner, Practical Manual of Martial Law, 1940, taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Now, so Congress creates the scenario where the necessity is there, and then they have the excuse to create martial law. That's exactly what they do. They orchestrate the scenario. They're really good at it, and that's what they do. Next to revenue itself, the late extensions of the jurisdiction of admiralty are our greatest grievance. The American courts of admiralty seem to be forming by degrees into a system that is to overturn our Constitution and deprive us of our best inheritance, the laws of the land. It would be thought in England a dangerous innovation if the trial of any matter on land was given to the admiralty. And yet that goes on every day. And this was U.S. Supreme Court, 1852. You think it's gotten any better? It's way worse. It's every day. Hello, folks. Time to wake up. Check out my other videos. Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Cult Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 7. Do-it-yourself, how not to volunteer for the selective service in the draft. Martial laws here. Do-it-yourself, no income tax. Do-it-yourself, free mail. Do-it-yourself, kangaroo courts 1 through 19 now. Canada Border Pigs Playlist, Bar Members and their Satanic Connections Playlist. Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. William Pitt the Younger, speech in the House of Commons, November 18, 1783. Is anything changed, folks? Not a chance. Congress the tyrant. The action of Congress in the passage of the first Legal Tender Act was placed distinctly upon the ground of the existing imperative need of government, and the Legal Tender Clause was urged and adopted as a war measure. Military dictatorship, folks. Juilliard versus Greenman, U.S. Supreme Court. Congress, claiming its martial law power to declare war, suppress insurrections, repel invasions, impose martial law in the United States, and never discontinued it. The result was an extension of military and municipal jurisdiction of Congress. But where's the evidence of this? Look at the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the legal tender laws, the 14th Amendment, etc., etc., etc. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner, 1968. Do you think it's changed? Absolutely not. It's gotten worse. The 14th Amendment is an extension of the national military powers presently used in a municipal character and enforced by municipal laws, stretched far beyond their original limitations and enforced by Article 1 tribunals. That's the bought and paid for whore that you think is a judge. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. Statutes have been passed extending courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. Martial law supersedes common law. So you can go into their kangaroo court and say the Constitution says I can do this, and the judge will tell you the Constitution doesn't apply here and I don't want to hear another word about it. Or he'll sit there and say I can do anything I want in this courtroom. And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. Despotism is military dictatorship, folks. Time to wake up. That's taken from the causes and necessities for taking up arms 1775. We're finding out what our founding fathers found out about. International law rule, adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction, federalizes state civil law, including common law. The rule serves to federalize not only the statutory but the common law of a state. The civil laws effective in an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws, and a cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to federal district court under sections whatever of the Judicial Code. Now it's 1331 and 1441 Title 28. And this is taken from Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, Report to the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, Part 2, a text of the Law of Legislative Jurisdiction submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President June 1957, and that's taken from pages 158 through 165. The United States shall guarantee to every state of this union a Republican form of government. Well, forget it. Forget it. They don't have any trouble at all perjuring their oath. The Constitution's a piece of shit. They ignore it completely. You want a despotism or a republic? They ignore it. These people are nothing but a bunch of whores. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. But in considering the question before us, it must be borne in mind that there is no law of nations standing between the people of the United States and their government and interfering with their relation to each other. The powers of the government and the rights of its citizens under it are positive practical regulations plainly written down. The people of the United States have delegated to it certain enumerated powers and forbidden it to exercise others. And that's Dred Scott versus Sanford, U.S. Supreme Court, 1856 and 7, I guess. But that's if you had a lawful government, okay? These people are nothing but a bunch of tyrants, okay? It's about time. It's a piece of shit constitution. They completely ignore it unless they have some political agenda. Look at what's going on with Trump. They completely ignore their felony statutes, their piece of shit felonies, and go ahead and let these pigs get away with their felonies because it's so good for business. The purpose of a Republican form of government is to shield we the people from international law. The state does not owe its origin to the government of the United States in the highest or any of its branches. It was in existence before it. It derives its authority from the same pure and sacred source as itself, the voluntary and deliberate choice of the people. A state is altogether exempt from the jurisdiction of the courts of the United States or from any other exterior authority, unless the special instances where the general government has power derived from the Constitution itself. The question to be determined is whether this state, so respectable and whose claims soar so high, is amenable to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of the United States. This question, important in itself, will depend on others, more important still, and may perhaps be ultimately resolved into one no less radical than this. do the people of the United States form a nation. By that law, the several states and governments spread over the globe are considered as forming a society, not a nation, okay? So, folks, what that's saying, in 1794, there was no nations on the planet. It was all corporations. It was all corporate governments, and the Supreme Court was going to decide whether the United States was a nation. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independent of that instrument. And that's Downs versus Bidwell, U.S. Supreme Court, 1901. Now, it doesn't say exactly that, but it's a summary. And so all you trolls out there, don't bother contacting me about this, because I'll just delete your comment, okay? The style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. But look at that. That's taken from a passport. And it just says United States of America. Passport's a military dictatorship document. Passport defined. A passport is a written document given to a person or persons by whom a commander of belligerent forces authorizes him or them to travel unmolested within the district occupied by his troops. Passports are issued by the State Department. Why do you think that when you go on the Homeland Security website, they tell you that you have to, they tell you that all U.S. citizens have to have a passport? Well, that's because you're entering a military dictatorship. That's why the whole country is a military dictatorship under these Homeland Security pigs. There's pigs everywhere. Passports are issued by the State Department or a similar office in other countries to diplomatic agents and others entering or traveling in foreign countries, which are the same general character as those issued during war. The latter should be, when practical, should have a photograph of the bearer attached. And that's under the Rules of Land Warfare, 1914 edition, Passport Safe Conduct, Safeguards, and Cartels, Chapter 7, Section 4, Article 276, page 100. Passport's a military document. Oh, look at that. The United States of America. That's a silver certificate. And if you look on the Federal Reserve notes, they all say the United States of America. At common law, only gold and silver are legal tender. If you want common law, it requires honest measures. The people are too stupid to figure that out. There is a distinction between debt discharged and one paid. When discharged, the debt still existed, though divested of its character as a legal obligation during the operation of a discharge. Discharge falls under the law of nations, international law. So if you use Federal Reserve notes or even these, then that's a silver certificate, but it's still a promissory note, and it still discharges the debt unless you actually have the silver in your possession. This still discharges. It's a negotiable instrument. It discharges the debt. It's a promissory note. The current Federal Reserve notes are not even that. They're an IOU. Governments descend to the level of a mere private corporation, take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen, where private corporate commercial paper and securities is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations, individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. Now, you know, people have contacted me about this one too. It's a summary. If you don't like it, go somewhere else, okay? You want to comment about it, I'll delete your comment. That's easy. Have a great day. I'm getting worked up here, can't you tell? U.S. Supreme Court, Clearfield Trust Company. This is the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. As used in this act, the term United States means the government of the United States. The term currency of the United States means currency was legal tender in the United States and includes United States notes and Federal Reserve notes. And that's located at 48 Stat 337. The forced loans of 1863, 1862, and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. Okay? National supremacy. That means the federal government is not a federal government anymore. It's a national government. It's supreme. That's why they turned the states into territories. They form a part of the public debt of the United States, U.S. Supreme Court. Federal Reserve notes are commercial paper. Federal Reserve notes are a forced loan. Federal Reserve notes are IOUs. All commercial paper falls into two categories. It's either a promissory note or an IOU. A requirement for a promissory note is a promise to pay. The gold or silver certificates were promissory notes because they had a promise to pay. But you can never, ever pay a debt with a Federal Reserve note. Right there. Says here. This certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $1. $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. But it says here, this certificate is legal tender for all debts in public and private. That makes it discharging debt with limited liability. If you want to go get the silver, then you'll be paying a debt. Otherwise, you're discharging the debt with limited liability. This country is full of Satanists. This rule does not interfere with the right of the victorious invader to tax the people or their property, to levy forced loans, to billet soldiers, or to appropriate property, especially houses, lands, boats, or ships, and churches for temporary and military uses. That's Article 37 of General Orders 100, which is the Libra Code. In despotic governments, the government is usurped in a similar manner, both upon the state and the people. Hence, all arbitrary doctrines and pretensions concerning the supreme, absolute, and uncontrollable power of the government in each man is degraded from the prime rank which he ought to hold in human affairs. In the latter, the state as well as the man is degraded. In both degradations, striking instances occur in history and politics and in common life. Chisholm versus Georgia, that's like 1794. Banknotes constitute a large and convenient part of the currency of our country, and by common consent, nobody forces you to use these. Serve the great extent all the purposes of coin. In themselves, they are not money, for they are not a legal tender. Well, actually, they made them legal tender. And yet they are good tender unless specifically objected to as being notes merely, and not money. They subserve the purposes of money in the ordinary business of life by the mutual consent express or implied of the parties to a contract, and not by the binding force of any common usage, for the party to whom they may be tendered has an undoubted right to refuse accepting them as money. Cryptocurrency is not a forced loan. Anything can be used as a medium of exchange as long as you agree to it. It's called barter. But in fact and in law, such statutes are intended to be applied to those who are here as residents in the state under the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Federal Constitution and the so-called 14th Amendment. And that's United States versus United Mine Workers, 1947. And, that could be a summary of that case too, Contact information. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page is deleted due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group called Sovereignty International is being deleted, although I haven't been on Facebook for ages. My Yahoo private group called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants. My Google private group is called Administrating-Your-Public-Servant. Follow me on Twitter at Engineer Win. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. My BitChute profile is Sovereignty International, although I don't keep much there. They won't let me upload anything bigger than a half a gigabyte, and a lot of my videos are bigger than that. My Patreon is Sovereignty International, and I've got a MeWe group. MeWe is kind of like Facebook, although it's supposed to be open and free. I guess we'll see. Usually what these Satanists do is they tell you they're open and free until they get lots of people on there, and then they start clamping down and censoring and stuff like that. So I guess we'll see. Congress created two classes of citizens for the purpose of enslaving everybody. The term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states in that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. Citizenship is a political status and may be defined and privilege limited by Congress. Every taxpayer is assessed a trust having sufficient interest in preventing the abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. That's a summary. Slater's protestations to the effect that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligation to pay income tax. Unless the defendant can establish he's not a citizen of the United States, the IRS possesses authority to attempt to determine his federal tax liability. He's a slave, okay? U.S. citizens are slaves. Think about it. It's what he's saying, okay, right there. If they're forcing Slater to work for the government for nothing, okay? that means he's a slave. That's the definition of slavery, folks. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their dictatorship, plenary power covers those citizens even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. U.S. Supreme Court, 1948. This is 31 Stat 1432, an act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia, the legal estate to be the Sestake use. Congress created the Sestake Trust, right there. An act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia, at 31 Stat 1189, be it further enacted that interpretation and construction of said code, the following rules shall be observed. The word person shall be held to apply to partnerships and corporations. An act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia. This is at 31 Stat 1230, presumption of death. Okay, so again, this is all Congress that's done this, folks. Okay, Congress is really the tyrant here. Okay, YouTube is tyrants too, but they're only doing what Congress told them to do. Fortunately, we got somebody in the White House that's putting a stop to her, trying to. This is 15 U.S.C. Section 44. Corporation shall be deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest in any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, without shares. Okay, and so the top half is with shares and the bottom half is without shares, and the Sestake Trust would be without shares, folks. Yet still is found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former halls, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiancés to the use of the religious houses. That's the Roman cult, folks. Thus distinguishing between the possession and the use and receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal fiancé, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. To be bound in conscience to account to a Sestake use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. And that's taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mortmain. So they screen out intelligent people in the hiring process for their low intelligence thugs, Leos, they're pigs. And Jordan versus City of New London is a good example. It went to the Second Court of Appeals. I should say the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, number 99-9188. Robert Jordan had a master's degree to try to get a job with the police department, and he scored too high on their test. They don't want anybody with brains there. They want hired thugs, okay? They want to have a hired thug. They want to give them a gun and tell them to go out and assault people, and then their liars, their bar members, get them off. Okay, that's exactly what they do. Oh, this is the article, ABC News, New London, Connecticut, September 8, 2000. A man whose bid to become a police officer was rejected after he scored too high on an intelligence test has lost an appeal in his federal lawsuit against the city. Court okays barring high IQs for cops. Well, really, if you think about it, the court's bar members, and the bar members were mandated by Congress. So really, that's Congress. That's Congress has done that. No evidence obtained by an officer or other person in violation of any provisions of the constitutional laws of the state of Texas or the constitutional laws of the United States of America shall be admitted in evidence against the accused on the trial of any criminal case. It is the exception to the provisions of subsection A of this article that the evidence was obtained by a pig acting in objective good faith reliance upon a warrant issued by a neutral magistrate based on probable cause. And that's Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, and that's good faith. Okay, so these pigs, that's what they are. They're pigs. Pig stands for persons in government that intend to perjure their oath. These pigs know exactly what's going on, and Congress wants to make sure they get away with it. Oh, look at this. 18 U.S.C. 2707. Defense. A good faith reliance on a court warrant or order, a grand jury subpoena, a legislative authorization, or a statutory authorization, including a request for a governmental entity under Section 2703F of this title, a request of an investigative or a law enforcement officer under Section 2518.7 of this title, or a good faith determination as Section 2511.3 of this title, permitted the conduct complained of, is a complete defense to any civil or criminal action brought under this chapter or any other law. They want these pigs to get away with it. That's what these Congress pigs do. Law of nations is international law. Banks are international law. Military despotism is international law. Uniform commercial code is international law. All codes, rules, and regulations are international law. The forced loans of 1862 and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. That means the federal government isn't federal anymore, it's national, and it's supreme. Think about it, folks. During the Civil War, they paid government employees with treasury notes. Government employees were forced to loan the government money. When the government employees are paid treasury notes or bank notes, it's a forced loan. Both are government debts. Forced loans is probably the single most important thing for a military dictatorship. It makes it so the courts can presume that you do not pay a debt. It makes everybody into paupers. Paupers have no rights, even at common law, except what they want you to have. That's the way these bar member whores operate. And that's all intended exactly like that by these Congress whores. Money, according to Norm Franz. Gold is the money of kings, silver is the money of gentlemen, barter is the money of peasants, debt is the money of slaves. Federal Reserve was set up under the insurance laws of the United States in the middle of the night. Federal Reserve notes are worthless insurance script. Anything purchased with worthless insurance script is the property of the issuer of the script. Taxes are the fee for using the private money system. The single most important requirement for a Republican form of government is lawful money. Congress has sold themselves to the Roman cult. Congress has breached the trust. Congress is engaged in treason. That's exactly what's going on. We got some treason going on, folks. Trump is dealing with it. He's trying to root it out. But, I'm kind of getting a little bit skeptical. All the stimulus will be paid to anyone with the Social Security number in the form of Federal Reserve notes. Title 5, United States Code, Section 552A13. The term federal personnel means individuals entitled to receive immediate or deferred retirement benefits under any retirement program of the government of the United States, including survivor benefits. That means anybody with a Social Security number is federal personnel. Lawful money is not Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes are fake money. Lawful money is not bank notes. Lawful money is not forced loans. Lawful money is not discharged debts. Lawful money is not international law. Lawful money is not Federal Reserve notes. If we get hyperinflation, the cities will be the absolute worst place to be because the lockdown farmers are destroying milk and other crops because restaurants are closed. There have been major crop failures in the last 3 years in a row. It's a recipe for food prices to go up a lot. So you can see the formula of the hyperinflation. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Subscribe. I would say you ought to check out my Brighteon channel too, because who knows what YouTube is going to do, although I guarantee you they're going to get their butt suit off. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. On YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. There's the front page of my channel, and the subscribe button's already clicked, otherwise it'll be red. The arrow's pointing at the bell. The bell has not been clicked. You have to click on the bell and the little menu will come up, and you have to say if you want to be notified of all uploads. What is called proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power. Okay, so Congress sets up the scenario where we have this real big emergency. Oh yeah, we set it up ourselves. And so then we can do martial law now for our Roman cult handlers. That's why they have to pass statutes for common law offenses. That's why all statutes are edicts under martial law. We can't even begin to count the number of times judges, lawyers, and statesmen have said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by statutes. They'd be more truthful if they said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by martial law. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellen to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. There is no common law of the United States that is distinguished from individual states, and courts of the United States, instead of administering common law in any particular system, conform to law of the state where they are situated. And this is actually an old case, 1855. That's before the Civil War. Well, it's the same today. It's worse yet. There's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden, with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. And that's 1892. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions for its application. And so it's the same in Texas, in every state. All of them are the same. Under a military dictatorship, there's no law, which is why they're required to pass statutes, which are edicts for common law crimes like murder and assault. This creates civil law, which creates a democracy. Under a military dictatorship, you have a democracy. Democracy is international law. I have exclusive content available on my website and on Patreon. My website has 2 subscription levels, and I accept cryptocurrencies. My basic subscription level is $29.99 a year for the videos only. My platinum subscription level is $49.99 a year for videos plus unlimited consultations. But I'm not a liar. Well, I'm an attorney. But I can tell you what I would do and where to find the forums under certain circumstances. And the only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception. My agenda is to expose it for all our benefit. But I cannot fight all the battles. I need people being on point and winning cases. I've been winning some cases lately, and so we all need to be staying out of their jails and winning cases and being on point. And so if you want to make a donation, just as buy a subscription as a donation, it's a modest donation, there's no doubt about it, but it's a whole bunch of people chipping in a little bit, adds up pretty fast, so everything's appreciated. Some of my exclusive content is the Arlington Private Information Share, Land Deed Training, Estoppel Certificates Training, Foreclosure Estoppel Certificates Training, Corporate Denial Training, Toll Roads Notice and Demand Training, Invoice Training, Notice of Void Judgment Training, Revocation of Signature Training, Third Party Witness Training, Federal Habeas Corpus Training, Revocation of Voter Registration Training, Criminal Complaint Training. There's about 3 videos of that. There's actually back here the Land Deed Training. There's 2 or 3 videos of that too. Back here, Lawsuit Training. There's one of those. There's going to be more other training requests. If it qualifies something that I haven't done already, I'll consider it. There's Northeast Private Information Share videos. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free, linked on my videos and on my website. All exclusive content are available on my website, and you can buy a subscription there. And there's my Patreon channel at Sovereignty International. They've been telling people for decades that we're in a democracy. Do you think that's an accident? Of course it's not an accident. A dictatorship's a democracy. It's not the rule of law because anything goes. They can do anything they want. Okay, think about it. We will establish a perpetual obligation and concession. This all began with the Roman cult in 1213. Actually, it probably began before, but we can prove that it started in 1213. We will establish this as concessions of England to the Pope, 1213. We'll establish a perpetual obligation and concession that from the proper and special revenues of our aforesaid kingdoms for all the service and customs which we ought to render for them, saving in all things the penny of St. Peter, the Roman Church shall receive yearly 1,000 marks sterling, namely at the feast of St. Michael 500 marks, and at Easter 500 marks, 700 for the Kingdom of England, 300 for Ireland. And so there's the city of London right there, and that's in downtown London. That's about a couple square miles. Most people don't have the courage to share this. This little country that almost no one has heard about funded all sides of World War I and World War II, and will start World War III if we do not stop them. After the concessions of England to the Pope in 1213 was signed, King John had to make money to pay his tribute. King John imposed martial law rule and started to do things to raise money to pay his tribute. It took only 2 years for the people to figure out what was happening, and the Magna Carta was the result. So 1213 and 1215 is when the Magna Carta happened. The Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John. Neither is it a treaty, for we cannot say it was concluded between two legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between two nations, nor is it a law. The bearers do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon them. Magna Carta is therefore a contract, but resembles a treaty concluded between two nations, in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other. So they stuck a sword to his throat, and they said, "Here, king, we want you to sign this." And this is a Canadian court case, Perlman versus Pichet, and Attorney General of Canada, at 4 Dominion Law Reports 147. The City of London, these are all sections in the Magna Carta showing that it was a military dictatorship. The City of London shall have all its ancient liberties and free customs, so they were charging people to go into the city. As well by land and water, furthermore we decree and grant that all of the cities, boroughs, towns, and ports shall have their liberties and free customs. They were charging people to go into the cities. No village or individual shall be compelled to make a bridge. They were making people build bridges. No sheriff, constable, coroners, or others of our bailiff shall hold pleas of our crown. What do you think those pigs do on the side of the road when they want, "Can I see your driver's license, registration, insurance, please?" They're holding your plea. That's exactly what they're doing. Tell it to the judge. No constable or other bailiff of ours shall take corn or other provisions from anyone without immediately tending money therefor. So they were seizing people's property. We're going to take this. They're a bunch of thieves. No sheriff or bailiff or other person shall take the horses or carts. So they were stealing people's property. There's lots of sections. You read the Magna Carta, it's full of this stuff. Neither we nor a bailiff shall take for our castles or any other work of ours wood. They were stealing people's wood. No bailiff for the future shall upon his own unsupported complaint put anyone to his law. What do you think that pig is doing on the side of the road? "Can I see your driver's license, registration, insurance?" He's assaulting you with his codes. And he's supposed to produce witnesses. To no one will we sell, to none will we refuse delay, right, or justice. These whores sell their justice every day. If you don't pay the fee, they'll dismiss it. Take it from me, they do it to mine all the time. These whores like McBride, this whore McBride. I'm not done with that son of a bitch. Of bankruptcy and military occupation after the concessions of the Pope precipitated the Magna Carta. The bankruptcy and military occupation in colonial days precipitated the War of Independence. They replaced the true Article 13 with the current so-called 13th Amendment. They allowed bar members to infiltrate. 70 to 90% of members of Congress and the legislatures are bar members. Regency. It's called British Accredited Regency. The office or jurisdiction of a region or body of regents, a government or authority by regents. A regent's a person who exercises the ruling power in a kingdom during the minority absence or other disability of the sovereign, a governor or ruler. British Accredited Regency. Inns of Court. These are certain private unincorporated associations in the nature of collegiate houses located in London and invested with the exclusive privilege of calling men to the bar. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition. Okay, so they're in that walled-in area that I showed you a minute ago, the City of London. This is the real 13th Amendment. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept, retain any present pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever, from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power. Okay, so a bar member is receiving an honor from a foreign power. Such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them or either of them. Carolina Charter, yielding and paying yearly to us, our heirs and successors, for the same the yearly rent, 20 marks of lawful money of England, at the Feast of All Saints yearly forever. The first payment to begin and be made, the Feast of All Seats, which shall be 1 year, in the year of our Lord 1665. And also the fourth part of all gold and silver, which within the limits aforesaid, shall from time to time happen to be found. The Carolina Charter, 1663. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond our ancient limits, depriving us of the accustomed and estimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. So this is causes the necessities for taking up arms. This is again and again and again. For altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. It's a military dictatorship, folks. Martial law is really no law at all. What is proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power. That's why they passed literally millions of codes, rules, and regulations. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren, the children of Israel, maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. They need to be put to death. Sorry, folks, I hate to tell you that, but you're all a bunch of Satanists because you're putting up with this. Okay, that's what it comes down to, is you're all a bunch of Satanists. You're allowing this evil to be going on in our country, and you're all a bunch of Satanists. Oh, 2 years. 2 years after the Declaration of Independence, and you don't think that the War of Independence was over revenue, over making money, and all of that was a bankruptcy? Well, get a load of this. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising a revenue in His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to create great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no shit, Batman. That from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, or assessment whatever payable in any of the colonies or provinces or plantations in North America, except such duties that may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. And that's George III, chapter 12, 1778. 2 years after the Declaration of Independence. It's all about bankruptcy. It's exactly what it is. Taxes caused the War of Independence. If they can tax you, then you are their slave. You are forced to work for them for nothing. It has become more and more difficult to be free. Felonies mean nothing unless they have some political agenda. Tax is an impost, a tribute imposed on the subject. If you're a subject, you're a slave. In public law, taxation signifies a system for raising money for public purposes by compelling payment by individuals of sums of money called taxes. The subjects of every state ought to contribute to the support of the government. If you're a taxpayer, you're a slave. You are forced to pay to work for the government for nothing. And you're a subject, okay? You're a piece of property. Dictionary of English Law, Sweet Maxwell, London, 1959. Declaration of Rights, 1776. Cedes for the first bankruptcy, for the next bankruptcy, and provided further that nothing herein contained shall affect the titles and possessions of individuals holding or claiming under the laws heretofore in force or grants heretofore made by the late King George II or his predecessors or the late proprietors or any of them. So it's all there still. Treaty between the King and the 13 colonies of the United States of North America, signed at Versailles, July 16, 1782. Okay, this is not the Treaty of Peace of 1783. This is 1782. Article 1, it's agreed and certified that the sums advanced by His Majesty to Congress of the United States under the title of a loan in the years 1778, 1779, 1780, 1781, and the present 1782 amount to the sum of 18 million livres, money of France, according to the following 21 receipts of the above-mentioned underwritten Minister of France, given in virtue of the full powers to wit. So this is going to be over the next several slides. We're going to be taking this same stuff from this Treaties and Other International Acts of the United States of America, edited by Hunter Miller, Volume 2, Documents 1 through 40, 1776 to 1818, Washington Government Printing Office, 1931. So I'm not going to repeat that part again. Okay, it's taken from the same document. Okay, so here's an itemization of the various payments, loans that were made. In 1778, there were 4 installments, total of 3 million livres. In 1779, there was another 4, total of 1 million livres. In 1780, there was 5 with a total of 4 million livres. In 1781, there was 5 with a total of 4 million livres. And in 1782, there was 3 with a total of 6 million livres. And again, that's all taken from that. Amounting to the whole 18 million, to which receipts the said minister has promised in the name of Congress on behalf of the 13 United States to cause to be paid and reimbursed to the Royal Treasury of His Majesty on the 1st of January 1788. So they had 5 years, right? 1782, well, 6 years. At the house of the Grand Banker of Paris, the said sum 18 million money of France with interest at 5% per annum. And so plus 5%. In Tyrants versus Taylor, it stated that the dissolution of the regal government no more destroyed the rights of the church to possess and enjoy the property which belonged to it than it did the right of any other corporation or individual to his or its own property. In the latter case, the Chief Justice, in reference to the corporation of the college, observes that it's too clear to require the support of argument that all contracts and rights respecting property remain unchanged by the Revolution, and the same sentiment was enforced more at length by the other judge who noticed this point on the cause. And so again, this is the Society, etc. versus the town of New Haven. 8 Wheat, 464, that's U.S. Supreme Court. That's like in the early 1800s. This is the definitive treaty of peace of 1783. And if you notice here, King George. Notice that it was the King of France that they owed the money to. Remember that, right? It having pleased the divine province to dispose the hearts of the most serene and most potent King George III, by grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. Okay, so King George financed both sides of the War of Independence, and he did it under instructions from the Roman cult. Defender of the faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lindesberg, Arch-Treasurer and Prince Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. So they don't mention that stuff unless it's important, and so he was doing it under instructions from the Roman cult. And it's agreed that the creditors on either side shall meet no lawful impediment to the recovery of full value and sterling money of all bona fide debts there heretofore contracted, and there shall be a firm and perpetual peace. Yeah, right, bullshit. King of England and France, King George the Tyrant was King of England and France, financed both sides of the War of Independence. The United States owed France 18 million livres from the war. He was Arch-Treasurer and Prince Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the United States of America. Queen Elizabeth, the bitch, is now Arch-Treasurer and Prince Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the United States of America. There's 2 ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword and the other is by debt. On Christmas Eve, 24th of December, 1913, the middle of the night, Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act, setting up the scenario for the next bankruptcy. It took less than 20 years for the Federal Reserve banksters to set up the next bankruptcy. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rule the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley, Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all American citizens. The majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule for 40 years. Freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. And that's taken from in Reg, the U.S. Senate Report number 93-549, dated November 19, 1973. So notice that March 9th, 1933 went into a national emergency. Whoa, look at this. This is U.S. Congressional Record, March 17th, 1993. It is established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933, 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June 5, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause. The gold clause dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. And that's, look at that, both of them happened on March 9, 1933. The emergency and the bankruptcy. You think that's an accident? Congress planned it that way. And then they started with their bought and paid for clerks masquerading as judges. Bar members, when acting to enforce a statute and the subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer, not in a judicial capacity. Courts administering or enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially. They're edicts under martial law, but merely act as an extension, as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not a discretionary. Okay, so they can't just do anything they want. They got to do what they're told. Okay, they're bought and paid for clerks. It's the accepted rule, not only in state courts, but in the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes, as a bought and paid for clerk. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, act as mere clerks. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. When there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. And that is citing Koch, and Koch is being cited in Bradley versus Fisher, which is 13 Wall 335, which is U.S. Supreme Court, and that is being cited in a federal court case. Judge wears a military uniform. The judge sits there and plays stupid. If you fail to follow some obscure rule procedure, they sell you into slavery. Everything they do is a fraud and a nullity. Oh, look, we got a bunch of whores. Judge works for the state. Prosecutor works for the state. Look at their wearing their military uniforms. Police witness works for the state. The vast majority of the disputes that the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, and the only witness, also the police, all represent the same party. And since no corpus delicti, mens rea or acts reus, can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be heard according to its own laws, the state therefore is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. That's exactly what they are. They're nothing but a bunch of thieves. Section 1. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime whereof the party had been duly convicted. So the so-called 13th Amendment now is set up so they can sell you into slavery, and they can say, oh, it's a contract, or you agreed to it. They can sell you there. Duly convicted, okay? They have their show trial and their kangaroo court. He, the prisoner, as a consequence of his crime, not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights, except those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is, for the time being, a slave of the state. These people are Satanists, okay? And you all are Satanists too, because you're letting it happen. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but is supported by unquestionable authorities, and very particular and very horrible. Their restoration is indeed a step towards darkness, cruelty, and despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits, as ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell. It is the Society of Loyola, and that's John Adams, second President of the United States. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away. The democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. That's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley in the Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. And so the Congress tyranny is the Roman cult. The Congress is owned and operated by the Roman cult. Oh, and look at this. The pimp, well, the Pope, well, he's still a pimp, came to Congress in 2015, right here. See, that's the pimp speaking before Congress. There's the owner, okay? Right there's the owner. And so the Roman conquest, okay? Congress is owned and operated by the Roman cult. Why do you think it's a tyrant? That's exactly what they are. And it's all done by the Roman cult. But what's all this text here? Okay, see, this here is pointing at this staff right there, okay? So let's see what this text says. It's right here. Roman Achaea military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. So that's the Roman Achaea military staff. And then what's this say? This is pointing at Biden, okay? That's the guy that's running for president right now. The guy that doesn't have 2 brain cells, I'm sure. Devout Roman Catholic honorary degree from Jesuit Scranton University. Okay, well, that makes sense. And what are these? This is pointing at these fascists here. And so that is a Roman bundle of rods bound to a weapon, symbolizing subservience under the rule of a single man. And so then what's this? that says, devout Roman Catholic trained by the Jesuits, installed the first Jesuit chaplain to the house. And that's Boner, whatever his name was, okay? So Congress is owned and operated by the Roman cult, folks, okay? Congress is a tyrant. Congress is owned and operated by the Roman cult. This YouTube tyrants are doing what Congress told them to do. Trump is trying to put a stop to it, but we need to do things to help him out, because he can't do this by himself. Congress is owned and operated by the Roman cult. On behalf of the Roman cult, Congress has been imposing a military dictatorship on everybody in America. Get a load of this. Obama and the pimp, oh, they're all laughing and chuckling and having a great old time. But when Trump is in there, he's not too happy about that, because justice is coming. Maybe we'll get to see him get his neck stretched. I would like to, I'll tell you. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren, the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. These people are Satanists. And because right here, because we're allowing this to happen, prisoner is a slave. So we're allowing this to happen, then we're Satanists too. Okay, we have to put a stop to it. And that's really what it comes down to. Mark Passios, a former Satanist priest, says that 90% of Americans are practicing Satanists. So is USA Christian? I don't know. I don't know. You decide for yourself. I think that we're going to get some major judgments. We got them coming right now, and it's going to get worse. And until we repent, and that's what's got to happen. Okay. Meanwhile, for those of you who are Christians, you better start looking at getting out of the cities, because the cities are going to turn into a hell on earth. Anyways, it's time to repent. It's time to repent. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.